It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the Coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It is the 10th of June, 2025. And joining me, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack. How are you, mate?
I'm good.
Got a big show to get through today. Plenty going on around the world and in Australia. You're telling me nothing much going on in Hong Kong at the moment?
I think we had our first very hot weather warning yesterday, another one today. So we've had a
when that's issued, what are we talking about temperature-wise?
It's only in the early 30s, but with the humidity, it makes it
the killer.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
okay.
We've had a lovely late spring and early summer, but that's come to an end.
It's back to heat and humidity, hot and sweaty.
Yep.
All right. In Australia, Channel 10's The Project show, the current affairs and sort of light treatment of news, has been cancelled, Jack. I think they've been on the air for a good 15 years, possibly even longer. I've never watched the show, to be honest, but it has been axed, and the final show will run on the 27th of June to be replaced by a news and current affairs program we don't know too much more about it than that. Jack, look, there's a broader issue here, isn't there? The project was always number 3 behind the two big commercial networks, 9 and 7. Even in its halcyon days, when it got sort of about 1 million ratings, it was always running third. It was a news program designed for younger people, and of course younger people are all streaming now and don't sit down and watch free-to-air all that often. So the audience just dropped off. But there's a broader issue here, I think, and that is, how long will it be for 3 free-to-air commercial networks to survive in Australia?
Yeah, there's been a lot of backwards and forwards on social media about the project going. It's a bit like Vegemite. People either like it or don't like it, and they really don't like it if they don't like it. And I guess I probably watched it a few times, I suppose. I was never a fan, but my reaction to people who don't like it is, good, don't watch it, and don't get upset that it's on, just don't watch it,
Yeah, no, fair enough. But look, when we look at Channel 10's ratings across the board, well, they've got morning shows on there where you can count viewers seriously in one hand.
More people in the studio than at home.
Yeah, exactly right. So I don't say this with any relish, but it just seems like Channel 10 is the one in the gun. Now, they're owned by CBS, Paramount, that media conglomerate, and they've obviously got funding, but the money's so tight across free-to-air television at the moment that three networks can't survive in Australia. One will have to go, and I imagine Channel 10 is in the frame there,
and that's because you as you said. The audience now doesn't want to agree to sit down at a particular time to watch a show. They'll watch it when they want to watch it, if it interests them, and they'll watch so much of it as interests them, but not, and that's not very much. They're quite happy to watch clips of these kind of shows on social media.
On social media, that's the other thing. Look, that's quite true too. But you've also got sort of revenue streams to worry about. Now, advertising on free-to-air television, the rates continue to decline. So the old rivers of gold are no longer there. We might look at on the cable side of things, the cable is also dying. I mean, cable TV is also dying. Foxtel now streams, of course, and they've gone through an ownership change. Obviously owned by News Corp, but that has been passed over now to I think a Russian oligarch living in the UK. I can't think of his name, but he's in control now of Foxtel and the streaming service and the cable network. The the big issue for them is, well, you look at, let's say, and people will say this, well, let's look at Sky News, and even Sky News After Dark with their audiences of 30 or 40,000. And you say, well, how do you make that work? Where the revenue comes to Sky News is through the United States. Sky News basically packaged up all their After Dark stuff, etc., is packaged up and put on YouTube, where there are significant revenue streams. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars. Channel 10 obviously don't have that out with the project. I mean, as you say, they can clip it and put it on Instagram and those sorts of things, but no one's sitting around, or very few people are sitting around, oh, it's 10 o'clock at night, I haven't seen the project yet, I better stream it. So this show, I think, is just part of the demise of one of our free-to-air networks, Jack.
Do you remember when Piers Morgan stormed off the set of his GB News show?
Yeah.
I think it was some controversy over something he'd said about Meghan Markle.
It was, yeah.
Yep. And they wanted to get him back, and he just said no. And I remember Andrew Neil being asked, should he go back? And he said, well, there's no reason for him to go back. I mean, I said, if I was running a network, he'd be the first person I'd want because he attracts eyeballs, right? And he went to a Murdoch-owned streaming service for a short time, but he's off that as well now, and he solely relies on his YouTube thing, and he's making more money he's ever made in his life.
Yeah, this is happening across the board. So at some point, CBS will make some. Well, look, there are some very hard decisions being made at Channel 10 right now. I know a journalist friend of mine has been let go there, and they are into the cost-cutting exercises. And we'll move on to this because there are Channel 7, Channel 9, those sort of celebrities, newsreaders, presenters of news and current affairs programs and things like that. People on big salaries will be looking at serious cutting, Jack.
Indeed. The was it Sam Chisholm who was head of Channel 9 for some time?
In the golden days, yeah.
Yeah. Losers have meetings, we have parties.
And a friend of mine was working at Channel 7 briefly. He runs his own production company now. And he said when he started working at 7, and this has more to do with some of their, shall we say, fairly poor behaviour around some major defamation trials in recent times. He said it was like the good old days of Sam Chisholm had just moved over to Channel 7, but this was probably 10 years ago. Everyone was drunk by midday or had left the building, and he was first employed as a producer, and they said, "Oh, okay, well, there's a desk for you set up there." And for the first 2 weeks he was there, no one told him anything about what he's supposed to do. So there's a real sense of despair, I think, that represents a real sense of despair. But the Chisholm days are well and truly over, where, the same guy used to work a lot at 9. You get the Kerry Packer a Christmas hamper every year from Kerry Packer. It was never love or regards or anything like that. It was always from. Those days are well and truly over. And
I think that the top point of those days was when I think it was Sam Chisholm's 50th birthday, and he had the corner office out there in Willoughby, and they took out the window so they could use a crane to crane in the Harley Davidson motorcycle that they were giving him for his birthday.
Yeah, I mean, lovely times, no doubt, in the day. But I guess the biggest issue we have now, Jack, is how well our news is going to be presented, and we include the ABC and SBS for that matter into that. With resources thinning, you know that the old days of having a bureau representative, if not a chief, in places like New York, Beijing, London, of course, perhaps Paris. You might have someone in the Middle East. You might have someone in Africa as well. Those days are over, and increasingly news services are having to sort of collaborate with other news services and buy in their material, buy in their video reporting and so forth. SBS, no better example, which is a genuine world news service, but most of the providers there, most of the reporters providing there are either freelancers, or they work for other agencies. And I just wonder how this is going to affect the mainstream media and the reporting of issues. And I suspect it's not going to be a good thing.
Yes, yeah. Well, Hong Kong, well, we talk about the riots later, but Hong Kong was full of foreign journalists for a year during our year of riots, and it was heavily reported overseas. And I've got to tell you that the reporting was awful. The only person who came up here and made sense of it was from your newspaper, and that's because he'd actually lived here for some years and understood the city. All the rest of the reporting was rubbish.
Well, I remember another Hong Konger, another expat, who was saying, who initially, and perhaps for the first several months, was very supportive of the protesters, but then that sort of began to dwindle because it was so incredibly disruptive to just normal life in Hong Kong. So I can find on Instagram one of his messages to me saying, wow, terrific. Gee, I love these people's courage and, well done them. And 3 months later, he wanted them all locked up.
Who was the Australian journalist come up here? The bloke who did the
Headley
podcast.
Thomas was up.
Yeah, Headley
here,
Thomas.
think,
yeah, but he worked for the South China Morning Post, and I think he married someone up here as well, and all that sort of stuff. He had family here, and he understood the city. But almost everybody else who came up and reported it didn't understand the city, didn't know what they were looking at, and the reporting was really terrible.
Yeah, well, you can still get that, from mainstream media anyway. I mean, let's say you're covering, a news network is covering a story that happens in Paris, let's say, riots. PSG's just won the European Cup, and there's, as the French do, as Parisians do, go and set fire to a few things.
Oh, and
what they will do is stand in front of the Eiffel Tower without fail and do their piece to camera that way. I'm not sure that that's the best form of reporting. The other thing we've got in terms of news, and we're going to talk about LA riots and all this sort of stuff soon, is everyone's got a camera now.
Yes.
And everyone's got a video camera. And so there's always this sort of clamour to get that footage. And when that footage can circulate on social media well before it makes news. And, Elon Musk and others say that Twitter is more immediate. Other, perhaps, groups like Facebook and Instagram, perhaps less so. And the difficulty you've got with just providing someone with a report on social media is that you don't have these sort of journalistic techniques being used. You don't have the sense of balance. You don't have the corroboration of stories, and that in that sort of environment, disinformation tends to flourish. the other thing you've got, just to make things even more complicated for all forms of media and all forms of information and their truth or the veracity or otherwise, is that you've got AI now coming in, and AI is producing videos that suck people in all the time.
They're pretty good.
Yeah, well, of course, and it's going to get better. Where they get things wrong, of course, is the hands all over the shop and all that sort of thing. But that even that is becoming improved now. So you'll see a lot of video if you flip through social media. You'll see a lot of video that's just fake, straight out fake. So it's going to be tough for consumers, news consumers, people who wish to be informed, to one, sort out the wheat from the chaff, and then have news that's reliable and professionally prepared on their television screens.
Yeah.
The great issue around that is that radio is becoming perhaps more and more important than television in many ways. So, yeah, look, these are big days. I would think, I mean, I'm not going to suggest that the death of Channel 10 will come soon, but I'm certainly not going to put a use-by date on that. But when you look at the economics of this, there's simply no reason why the three networks can survive. There was just no way in any sort of viable way. And when you look at the programming on these channels now, Jack, it's just awful, mate. Like outside of news, it's just cheap TV, reality TV for the most part, and then a lot of programming that most of the world had already forgotten. Yeah, tough times if you're in the television business, tough times if you're in the media generally. Mike Carlton, he had a bit of a moan about the ABC just the other day. He said, "Have I ever mentioned that ABC I view as a clunky, plodding, total pain in the arse? Almost as if they'd designed it to stop you finding the show you want." And you've written here, Jack, that's Mike Carlton on X, and I agree with him.
Well, I just want to put this on the record that I've actually agreed with Mike Carlton.
Yeah, well, no, look, that is you couple of old blokes who can't figure their way around a television remote control. I have to say, with most of these streamers, and I could run a long list of the streaming companies that I have. I have Foxtel. I have the new one that's come through Foxtel that's got all the HBO stuff on it. Yeah, Stan and Disney Plus, and I pretty much got them all. And none of their indexes are very good. Nothing's alphabetical. You would think maybe alphabetical lists might be useful. So it's this kind of thematic breakdown of programming that becomes, I don't think there's anyone worse than Foxtel, to be honest, where I often have to go the dreaded search button and flip through the remote control on a keypad and basically have to spell the entire program out because it won't predict it. That's how shitty it is. And then finally you get to your program. So a lot to be done there. And you would think the simple solution would be, yes, you can highlight and have thematics and all that sort of stuff, drama, comedy, all that sort of stuff. Then you go, here's an alphabetical list, and just scroll your way down till you find your program. How can it be that hard? ABC iView is in the same camp.
Yeah, even the ABC Asia TV, you've got to scroll through a whole lot of rubbish just to find the TV schedule to find out whether the game of footy you want to watch is actually on.
That must be annoying. That would annoy me. Yes, these things, these apps have been put together by very, very intelligent young men and women. But when it comes to the business of outlining the product that you've got there, the number of TV shows, the number of movies, documentaries, etc., we're not going to all get this on thematics. You provide an alphabetical list, and the world will beat a path to your door.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to go on the record that I was a huge fan of Mark Carlton when he was doing radio in Sydney. This is
Poor
before
old Mike with his arthritic fingers, having to press the remote control button more than 4 times. The poor old bugger.
This
He's
is
often
before,
in wine by about 5 o'clock anyway.
no,
isn't
he tells everyone in the world he no longer partakes. But
Oh, well, there you go.
I was a fan
apologise.
before he got angry at the world. But I just want to say maybe we have a rapprochement coming on.
Rapprochement with you and Mike Carlton. Well, it won't happen. He's still blocked me.
Well, I seem to be unblocked. I don't really know why. Peter Fitz though, he's still got me blocked.
Got you blocked? Oh, well, he follows me. So there you go. All right, the super tax on unrealised capital gains. Speaking of social media, I have seen some absolute claptrap being put about, Jack, about how the unrealised capital gains, you'll have this guy, 25-year-old guy saying, what do you mean? The money the money I earn will be taxed before I earn it? And it's clearly one of these sort of right-wing type think tanks, either IPA or an advanced sort of thing. And they go, what do you mean? I'll be taxed on it. So let's have a sensible discussion about what's proposed, Jack. You lead the way, if you wouldn't mind. We're talking about 80,000 taxpayers or 80,000 superannuants for a start.
These are people with balances over $3 million, I understand. And what's proposed is that their tax rate will go up for anything they earn on the above 3 million earnings, right? But that will also include taxes on where the assets they hold in their superannuation fund have an increase in value, and they will, as I understand it, they will be required to pay a capital gains tax on that, even though they have no intention of realising that asset, no intention of selling that asset. So if you had, 100,000 BHP shares and BHP went up 50%, you would have to pay the capital gains tax on that increase.
Well, yes, you've got it absolutely right. Can I give you a bit of a case study, Jack? Because this came up in the Fin Review. They talked about this woman named Lucy. Now, I don't know if Lucy exists or whether she's just an exemplar, but Lucy had a starting super balance of 3.7 million. Good luck to her for a start. And over the course of that year, the superannuation balance increased to 4.1 million. Now, that means her superannuation earnings are 350, from the 3.7 to the 4.1 is her superannuation earnings for the year are 350,000. But only about 1/4 or 26.8% of those earnings are taxable because only 1/4 of her adjusted super balance is above the 3 million threshold. So what's taxed there is the increase, but only 1/4 of it because the 3/4 of it sit underneath the 3 million threshold. And that puts her taxable earnings from her $350,000 at $93,905, Jack. That's her taxable earnings, and 15% of that is $14,000.86. So if you're a nurse earning $93,905, you would be paying a much higher tax rate than $14,000, but that's how it will affect you with the legislation as far as we know it so far. There may well be elements of indexation that need to go in there. I suspect they do have to go in there because 3 million in super holdings, these are private superannuation holdings, by the way. This is not for those on industry super funds or some of the bank or financial sector funds. These are just for private superannuation holdings. And as I say, if you've got a $3.7 million total that turns into $4.1 million over the course of a financial year, you will pay in effect $14,000 in tax. And I think if most people looked at that, they'd go, "What's the problem?"
I don't think the government's going as well as that in the public sphere in terms of the argument. But you did make a good point.
Yeah, I mean, let's just get it out there. I mean, let's not have these sort of clown shows like Advance telling young people that they will be taxed on money they are yet to earn. I mean, that's kind of the way they're selling it at the moment. It's an absurd thing. But here we've got a situation where a person by the name of Lucy has $4.1 million in superannuation and pays $14,000.86 more in tax than she would have. And when I talk about she will have other taxable income. So there you go. It's not a big thing. And it's a
relatively small number of people as well, I might add.
80,000, I think, have 80,000 Australians have superannuation holdings of $3 million or more. And if they've got to pay $15,000 in tax a year where they didn't have to pay it in the past, I don't really see a big problem. But it's part of the problem we do have in this country, Jack. I mean, obviously, I mentioned the disinformation that comes around. We've also got these, political commentary and so forth. It makes it almost impossible to reform your tax system. Imagine if you were going to do a root and if Chalmers, and I wouldn't say he has the courage to do it, you were going to do a root and branch reform of the income tax system. It just wouldn't get off the ground. It'd be slaughtered in the media for a start. So politicians are sitting there going, well, why bother with reform?
Well, have a look at the budget coverage. It's like a cargo cult.
Yeah. I mean what we should...
It's what they do every year is find persons A, B, C, D, and E, and who's better off?
Who's better off, or who's worse off? Or that question that you hear so often in Parliament: Will all Australians, or will there be one Australian worse off? And if you're going to do your reform on that basis, you'll never get anything done.
No one's asking the question: is the country going to be better off?
Yeah, well, we've got some debt to deal with, and look, it just bothers me that we are unable to do big things. But part of the problem we have with our taxation system in this country is that it relies so heavily on income tax, and that is an inefficient way of the Commonwealth earning money. You are better off with direct taxes. You are better off with consumption type taxes, and possibly with obviously with protections for people who are in low socioeconomic strata. But that's ideal. If you're starting your system from day one, that's how you do it, because it's efficient. It's taken at basically the point of sale. But yeah, look, I think the big thing that's got me about this, when I've looked at it and gone, hang on, this is, I'm not sure what the government, to be honest, I haven't seen what the government expects to pocket out of this. But if it's 80,000
No, they haven't told us
people,
that, as far as I'm aware.
Sorry?
They haven't told us that, as far as I'm aware.
Well, it's going to be more, but if it's 80,000 people at $15,000 $15,000 a hit, and it'll obviously be a bit more because people will have more significant superannuation holdings than 3.7 or 4.1. That's actually not a lot of money. 15,000 by 80,000. What are we talking about, Jack?
Not enough. Not enough to go through the political.
So it's a nickel and dime reform that affects perhaps the wealthiest Australians. And we're getting all this sort of mad commentary around it. I'm sort of you understand why governments don't get in the reform business when you see the sort of reaction to something like this, which is relatively small. Well, I'm sure our listeners have their own views on this, and we'd love to hear from them. If you are in that $3 million bracket, if you've got $3 million put away for a rainy day, good luck to you. Drop us a line, though, and let us know what you think. And of course, we'd welcome all sorts of general feedback on this. I think this is, you wouldn't even call it a reform. It's an adjustment. And it's proving itself very, very difficult to pass. Let's just concentrate on the politics, Jack, for a moment. Now, the Libs are being exhorted to negotiate with the government, while others have said they won't. And apparently the position now from the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, Ted O'Brien, is we are not negotiating, we are opposing it, which doesn't really matter much because they haven't got the numbers in the Parliament to do anything about it. The Greens look like they'll just basically fold like Superman on wash day, and this will get through. But the wider point, I suppose, for the Liberal Party is: are they going to just say no to everything? Because that seems to be the Tony Abbott way, and that's the way he's sort of pushing the Liberal Party to go, the federal parliamentary Liberal Party to go. Wouldn't they be better off engaging with the government and perhaps identifying a few areas where they can make some amendments, make some change, that sort of thing? Wouldn't they be better off in the tent than out of it?
Don't think it makes much difference at the moment.
Yeah, it probably doesn't, Probably doesn't. So the rest is just politics. On to housing. It's the big one, as we say, the big policy thing, and it's the big policy area for this government, the biggest challenge, I think, for our society, and a policy platform on which the government will be held to account in 3 years' time.
Indeed. And I've been critical of Claire O'Neill. I thought she was pretty hopeless in her last job, but credit where it's due. I think she's onto something here.
Yeah, most definitely. So just broadly speaking, she is looking at the raft of smaller government stuff, so local government particularly, and state government to a degree, about getting reforms to housing approvals, which is just absolutely smothered in red tape at the moment.
Yeah, there are two reasons why. I mean, construction costs in Australia are on world standards very, very high, and there are two reasons for it. One is too many regulations, and the other is in big construction work, giving the CFMEU and the other unions too much of a free run.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, and as I said, prior to the last election, put them all in a room and sort it out. Get a summit organised and particularly get local government around. I was talking to one of my neighbour who's a builder, and I said to him, part of the issue with supply is that you've got the construction industry in this country close to capacity. He said, yeah, that's a point, but you still have tradies still looking for work. And he says the issue is not just the availability of labour, the profound problems that you have to go through to get a planning approval done these days, Jack. And he's talking about engineers' reports. Any single one of these things will cost you between $1,000 and $5,000. An engineer's report, an environmental impact report, all these things are required by council. In my own neck of the woods, the DA approvals have gone backwards now. It's nearly a year. You put in a DA and it'll take it a year to get approved or not. And those things have to change. And this is what Claire O'Neill is talking about, isn't she?
Yep. Yeah.
And Cos Samaras has also given her a big tick. He said it looks like federal Labor has picked a side. They are once again leaning into a far more numerous and now decisive electoral class, younger, asset-poor Australians who hold far more sway than the ageing, asset-rich minority that once called the shots. For decades, he says, planning laws in every state have served one purpose: protect those who already own. And our tax system follows the same logic, rewarding wealth, not work. It's the very system that has created the schism within Australian society between generations, causes a tax reform man too. As a nation, we've gone out of our way to rig the system in favour of the already comfortable while leaving everyone else to scramble for what's left. It's a good quote, this. This approach, already signalled through Labor's superannuation policy, appears to be be expanding, with the federal government turning up the pressure on state governments to start representing the very voters who delivered Labor its mandate on May 3. That makes sense, and it makes political sense, Jack, because as he talks about this young asset, poor class of Australians who will only tolerate so much from a Labor government before they turn on them.
Yes.
If they don't get these things right.
Yeah. The only disagreement I would have with Claire O'Neill is she said that she will work with the building sector to implement innovative technologies to move past time-consuming and costly methods of construction. The government has no place in working out how people build houses.
Well, it gets to that, sort of holistic approach of getting everyone in the room and saying, well, how much can we prefabricate elsewhere for housing, particularly, let's say, for social housing? How much can we prefabricate elsewhere and move to site? So we don't have builders on site all the time. Look, I don't see a real problem with that, but talk to anyone in the industry and they will tell you the biggest problem is just this huge amount of red tape around building approvals, and the number of hoops that a prospective planner, someone who just wants to build a home, has to go through.
Yeah, people keep telling me that all the low-hanging fruit to improve productivity generally across the economy was plucked.
It pretty much has
during
been,
during the 70s and 80s. I don't think that's true. The biggest lump of low-hanging fruit left is overregulation. Everything you do, every time you write those regulations, you add to the cost of whatever it is that you're regulating.
I mean, if you've got to get half a dozen reports to get your DA approved, and regardless of cost, the builder was telling me anywhere between 1 and 5 for an engineer's report, for an environmental report, all this sort of stuff. The cost is almost inconsequential. It's the time it takes to get this stuff done. But the broader issue, Jack, is if you're going to have housing is, and the lack of it is having a huge impact on the productivity of our economy. If you work in if you live in Caroline Springs, and you work in the CBD, you're looking at 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours to get home at the end of the day. Are you going to be more productive or less productive than the person who lives around the corner from their workplace? So all these things need to be looked at. One of the things we did talk about in a previous pod, Jack, was the Dallas-Fort Worth reforms. They had massive problems, and Dallas-Fort Worth is a city not nowhere near the size of Sydney or Melbourne, but they had massive problems, rents going through the roof, supply issues around housing, and they changed. They changed that with just the intervention of intelligent planning, intelligent building parameters, essentially. So the old quarter-acre block, which was considered the standard, it can now be reduced. You can build 4 houses on a quarter acre. The issue around housing is so complicated now that there will always be winners and always be losers. So my daughter, who bought a place, took out a mortgage a couple of years ago and sort of battled with it as the interest rates rose. How is she going to feel with someone who's got an easier entry into the market and possibly even a subsidised dwelling? How's she going to feel when she looks at the value of her property not increasing at the same rate as it has been in the last 10 years? So there are going to be winners and losers. And the government has to, I guess, they've backed the right people here, but, in terms of these people, millennials are now entering their 50s, Jack. And some of them don't live in, don't live in their own housing. They're having to rent. You can't rent for life. All right. Well, big one. We'll see how we go. We're just still dealing with the theoretical too, Jack, because we've got the $10 billion housing fund, which is designed to generate interest to build social housing, etc., etc. But when the government was in the last parliament, in the dying days of the last parliament, not one of these houses were new built. There had been some renovations done, but yeah, it's a lot easier said than done, all this sort of stuff.
That was a very unconvincing policy when it was announced, and I don't think it's had any effect.
Very limited. My understanding is no new houses, certainly at the time of the Senate estimates hearing in, I'm going to say, March, and only just some cosmetic renovations done to existing housing. All right. Over in the United States, well, it's never boring with Donald Trump in the White House. First, he's had the massive blue with Elon Musk. The bromance is over. Elon, some of our listeners might not be aware of it. He did drop the bomb. I watched a clip of Joe Rogan, who had Kash Patel as a guest when Musk dropped the Epstein bomb on the Don. Have a nice day, DJT.
Kash Patel being the head of the FBI.
Kash Patel being head of the FBI. Joe Rogan gone, oh my God, Joe Rogan panicked. Kash Patel panicked. He couldn't say anything about it, did not want to enter into it. That tweet is now gone. Musk has taken that tweet down.
Yes.
And I think it's a sign that in his drug-addled mind, he might have bitten off more than he could chew there. Certainly he has way more to lose than Donald Trump.
Well, it's a bit of a lesson in the difference between money and power. Yeah, Elon Musk has oodles and oodles of money, but that doesn't give you the power that the President of the United States has.
Well, true. I mean, look, yes, he is the richest man in the world, but compared to the government, he has bugger all, really.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
The US economy is, what is it, 27 trillion?
Elon's richer than some modest small countries.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's about where he's around about the size of.
And if you look at it, if you look at his power, he's got really just one thing. I mean, owning X gives him a little bit of influence, but not power. The only thing he's got that gives him power is SpaceX.
Yeah,
because he's lifting 95% of the satellites up into the sky up into the atmosphere every year.
Which should make us all a bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because you need competition in that sector.
Yes.
I mean, I know there is. There was an American company.
They just haven't been successful yet, that's all.
Yeah, so it's been left largely to nationalised or nationalised companies, or in fact 2 or 3 nations in Europe getting together and doing it. It gives him enormous amount of power over the transmission of information. But of course, Trump let him know in his tweets, we could balance the budget just by
taking over SpaceX,
taking over all the concessions and subsidies we give you.
Yeah.
And I think that one, the ketamine air slowly lifted. The mushrooms, the psilocybin mushrooms, sort of dropped off, and he went, "Oh, hang on, this is going to cost me literally hundreds of billions of dollars."
Yeah, look, SpaceX has done a fantastic job. I mean, I still shake my head at wonder at landing that booster back on the pad.
I think he's on about a 10-to-1 shot with that at the moment.
But the world would be a better place if there were an equivalent to SpaceX, another competitor who could do their job anywhere near as well. And unfortunately, there's not.
I don't know how well you know the history of this, Jack, but Barack Obama in his second term was looking at significant cuts to federal spending, including NASA. Now, when you look at NASA, you can look at it as just being a great big money pit. But obviously what it does brings great technological change and all these sorts of things that can't perhaps be quantified. So Elon walked into Barack Obama's office, or at least they had a chat, and said, "Look, I can solve your problem here. I'll do SpaceX will liaise with NASA, but we will take on the spend, and we will use NASA technology and NASA people where possible." And Barack Obama said, "Yeah, okay, problem solved." So that's where the relationship broke down, or that's where the relationship between NASA. NASA is now sort of a secondary company almost. I mean, its engineering is considered to be some of the world's best, but that's where the privatisation of space essentially occurred.
And that happened because NASA was slow.
Yeah, I mean, and they're slow for a reason. They're slow for a reason, and so and good reasons often. You couldn't put many of Elon's SpaceX craft for a start. You'd end up with quite a lot of them being incinerated. So perhaps NASA are the ones that are more cautionary, and Musk is, the great Martian explorer. He's the one who's going to take risks.
Yeah.
He's also got some issues, mate. I mean, one of the things around the Doge business was getting involved in the transportation department. Well, the transportation department was having a very long look at Tesla, particularly over their unmanned driving. I think we're up to about 20 deaths now from driverless Teslas, and it's only a matter of time before a class action lawsuit comes Tesla's way. It was the Department of Transportation. The deaths far exceed. You might remember the Ford Pinto, Jack, which was a small car that the Ford was put on the market. This was in the Lee Iacocca days, but they didn't reinforce the fuel tank at the rear. So these things would just blow up on rear accident collisions. And that led to the deaths of many people. It led to the rise of Ralph Nader as a consumer advocate and litigator. And the situation, as I said, is worse with Tesla now in the United States, particularly around their self-drive cars. All right, now Trump and the courts, Jack. The courts are standing fairly strong, are they not?
Well, in a sense, there are two kinds of cases. This is the Federal Circuit Court judges who are issuing injunctions to stop the activities of the administration. There are the kind of straightforward, what the lawyers called ultra vires injunctions. That is where the court thinks that the administration has acted beyond its powers. But there are, and they're relatively easy to defend. The other ones are where the court thinks, well, the administration might have power to do it, but what it's done is wrong. And they're very hard to maintain once you go further up the chain, right? So eventually the Supreme Court's going to have to rule on the extent of the to which a sole federal court judge can issue a nationwide injunction. And I suspect that there will be limitations on that.
Well, one thing that's there are checks and balances to presidential power, to executive power, and that those are 1, the courts, 2, the Congress, and 3, the states. And the Congress has been pretty much a doormat for Trump so far, but I get the sense that's starting to change around the big beautiful bill, and the sheer amount of debt that's going to cause the federal system, and of course the states. We've had riots in LA, National Guard called out. I think 2,000 California National Guardsmen who were normally under the control of the governor, but the Trump administration used a bit of a loophole to say that the National Guard would only be used to protect federal buildings.
Yeah. There is a provision in the law that allows the federal government to use state National Guardsmen to do certain things. This will be it's an arguable case either way, I would have thought, whether they can do that or not.
I believe there is legal action underway now. Newsom is essentially suing on the basis that bringing in National Guard, and now I believe there are 500 Marines also guarding federal buildings. They're not wandering the streets, so we need to make that absolutely clear. Not wandering the streets heavily armed, but they are protecting federal buildings. The legal argument is that when you introduce either the National Guard or the Marines, that increases the cost and work that the state has to do in order to allow things like ICE raids, etc. Jack,
I don't think that's a legal argument. That's a political argument, essentially. The legal argument is does he have the power to do this? This
is what the Attorney General of California was arguing yesterday. That through their actions, the federal government is contributing to California's costs in essentially across the board in law enforcement, while they do things like put National Guardsmen out, not on the streets, but so-called protecting buildings, and also with these ICE raids. But California, I was speaking to a Californian last week. He said it's happening all the time. You'll see three large vehicles just pull up. They go inside. They'll grab people, bang, and this is supposed to happen at 3,000 at a rate of 3,000 a day. Not just in California, that's across the United States. So it's ugly, Jack. It's an ugly way of dealing with this problem.
Yes, it is.
Wouldn't it be a better one to say, all right, here's what we're going to do. Let's talk about a deadline in a year. Let's offer some financial incentives for those people who are not here legally to find another country, to go back to the countries they came from, and deal with it in a much better way than this. What is essentially the sort of hallmark of a totalitarian government, Jack. Black cars turning up outside your house.
We do this in Australia on a very small scale.
Not like this, Jack. I mean, these are happening all the time, and when I'm looking at these protests, I see the most prominent flag I see is the Mexican flag, and after that, I think it's disputable. There are quite a few Palestinian flags, so there are also American flags. You have, and not just in California, but throughout the United States, and particularly in the Southwest, you've got a large number of people who have come to an understanding, who have at least been led to an understanding that they would provide the cheap labour, that they would provide do the jobs that Americans didn't want to do, and that they would remain in the country and eke out a living that way. Yeah, and that's now gone, and I just think that's a real betrayal. It's a real betrayal, those people. And we've also seen people who are citizens that have been locked up and detained. We've got a trade union leader in Los Angeles. He was detained and has now been bailed. So, how much of this is about immigration, and how much of this is about wielding federal power?
Well, I think it's about immigration, and at the moment, this still holds popular support because people don't want this to go on.
Well, I mean, I see your question here. The question was, Do you approve of deporting illegal approve or disapprove of deporting illegal immigrants? And 54% say yes, and 46% say no. Well, maybe you throw into that question: Do you approve of basically of a law enforcement agency storming into public buildings and taking people away? See what an answer you get for that.
Well, I think you still get support for it.
Yeah, you reckon? I mean,
yes, I do.
I'm not sure that you fully understand American history, Jack. American history has always been about protest, has always been about civil disobedience. I mean, these are the great sort of preconditions of living in America. That you will get out in the streets and protest if you want to, but rather like the French. I just think there's clearly a better way to handle this issue. I mean, Barack Obama and George W. Bush looked at the issue of 15 million illegals being in America. This is in a country then of 310 million people, now 350. And the only solution they could come up with was to bring them in and put them on a pathway to citizenship. Now, that's one solution.
And they didn't work. That didn't work.
Well, they weren't really serious about doing it, Jack, because Congress wouldn't approve it and the states jacked up. So it never ever happened. That was not done in any significant way. So now we've got to a point where people are being pulled away, being detained and taken away, basically disappeared by the federal system. And I'm not entirely sure that I agree with you that this is all about immigration. I think it's about wielding state power.
Yeah, you mean wielding federal power or?
Well, power of the state
of the
from DC.
Yeah, I don't really see that. I think that there's been a push for a long time to fix the immigration problem in the United States, and nothing has worked. Nothing that's been done has worked. So there is a tolerance for even some heavy-handedness to try and find something that will work.
Well, I'm not sure that it will, Jack. Particularly if you're going to have protests. There are now protests planned in Atlanta. There are protests planned in Boston. There are protests planned in Chicago. They're not all blue states, by the way. And are we going to have National Guardsmen being called out again?
Quite possibly.
And you don't see that as alarming?
No, not particularly.
Why?
No,
Why would you not see that as alarming?
Well, there's a long history of this in the United States, as you pointed out.
Television journalists get shot by the LAPD with a rubber bullet. You don't see that as alarming?
I think it's regrettable.
Well, it's more than regrettable, mate.
I don't think the country's falling apart. He took aim and fired at her because he thought, well, she's a journalist, she's the enemy. Yeah, I haven't seen the video of that, and I've just heard reports
mate, he took aim. I have, and he took aim. He took aim at her. There was no one else to aim at besides the cameraman. No, it was a definite, and that was not by the National Guardsmen. The National Guardsmen, the footage I've seen, looked pretty aggressive, but that was the LAPD that fired shots there. And I suggest that particular officer should be off for the dreaded cancelling. But that's another matter. We are starting to get a real sense that America is burning, and the empire it's almost over. These are the death throes.
This is nothing like 1960.
It just depends on how far Trump wants to go.
This is nothing like 1968.
Not yet.
Nowhere near like 1968.
Well, okay. So tell us what happened in 1968 that was so magnified from the events of the last few days in LA.
There were riots, real riots, burning cities from one end of the country to the other.
That was now you're talking about around the assassination of Martin Luther King.
No, it went for a whole year. About all sorts of issues.
No, well, the assassination of Martin Luther King was the trigger to those
there were
events.
Bombings.
Those were when cities burnt. I mean, there's a great story about Boston. Boston was spared the uproar because what's his name? The musician Brown continued to play on throughout all of this. So those are around significant political events, Jack. And yes, it was a tumultuous time. America was involved in a war that it was badly losing American servicemen and women every day. So there was a lot of tumult, a lot of tumult there. But here we have really just, it's either an immigration immigration, a dark way of dealing with immigration and illegal arrivals, or it has more to do with the president basically muscling up to any detractors.
In 1968, there were bombings every week, political bombings in the United States every week for the year.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean,
This is much worse.
I just don't understand the whataboutism. I just don't understand how that can possibly be relevant. We're talking about events of 80 years ago. Maybe there is some sort of historical significance here.
Well, it's not 80 years ago.
What Americans in large cities are getting used to now is seeing vans pull up, screech out, ICE agents get out, grab people. You've got kids terrified in schools that when they get home, their parents will be gone, all this sort of stuff. And it is unnecessarily aggressive, Jack. Wouldn't it be better to say, here's our plan. We are going to act on this in a year, but you have a year to get your act together. You can come in, you can become a US citizen. Obviously, you will have to go through a number of hurdles to get that citizenship, or you can plan for your voluntary deportation, and we'll give you some money so you can go and live in a more hopeful environment elsewhere.
Yeah, I think you should write to your congressman and suggest that they put this up in Congress. Yeah.
No, well, mate, you're looking at really the terrorisation of certain elements of the population in the United States. I wouldn't be so trite about it if I was you.
Look, if people are there without legal reason to be there, they know this is happening. It's a choice they're going to have to make.
The sort of way, the indiscriminate way in which it's been done, we've heard of a number of American citizens who've been detained, Jack. So it's not just that. And we know that there's also a bill before the House that seeks to take away birthright citizenship, Jack.
Yes,
so, I mean, these are certainly signs that the Trump administration is looking to basically control its own citizenry. We can even talk about the Palantir stuff and the data and every American on the database there.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they have the authority to take away birthright citizenship. There you go. But it's not popular.
But they want to do it. That's the point.
Yeah,
it's not so much whether they can or not. It's the intent.
Yes. Well, most countries in the world don't have birthright citizenship, but I think the Constitution will protect it in the United States.
I would imagine you're right. But
I mean,
I'm saying
the very idea
that someone like Stephen Miller would be promoting this sort of bill should make you feel pretty uneasy.
We don't have birthright citizenship in Australia, for instance.
If you're born in Australia, you become a citizen automatically.
No.
No? Tell me.
If you're born, if you're there on holiday and you happen to have a baby, you don't become an Australian citizen.
Oh well, yeah, okay. No, I understand that.
And that's the situation in America. If you were born in America, doesn't matter where you're from or who your parents are, you become an American citizen.
We're not talking about holidays, though, Jack, are we? We're not talking about holidays.
That applies to very few places around the world.
So what we're talking about here, what the intent seems to me to be signalling is we just don't want your parents. We want to take the children away as well.
No, I don't see it that way at all.
You don't see it that way? The kids just go home and their parents aren't there.
I can tell you how I see it. I see it as an attempt to stop the situation where people go there, have a child, the child's an American citizen, and they stay with the child because of a family reunion thing. But people want to stop that. Now, I don't think they can, is my reading of it, but they want to try and stop it. And this has been an issue in the United States for quite some time.
So I just want to get this absolutely clear. So if we've got an Australian who is a lawful resident of this country, not a citizen, but a lawful resident, and they have a child, that child is an Australian citizen?
No, I don't believe so.
All right, get you to do some work on that, mate, and get back to us, because I'm not sure either, but you're the immigration lawyer, so let us know next week. All right, moving on. Frederick Forsyth, dead at 86. There'll be he hasn't, I don't think he's published for a little while. I may be wrong, Jack, but there'll be a small army of scribblers and researchers that will now be out of a job, because a Frederick Forsyth novel was a team effort from pretty much, I guess, the Odessa file onwards.
Yeah, I think he wrote, as I understand it, he wrote the great one, The Day of the Jackal, on his own, but I believe he has gone the Peter Fitz route since then.
Yeah, look, the Dogs of War is a hell of a book, and that's the one about basically the getting a mercenary army together to steal an imaginary African nation that is found to have large amounts of one mineral or another. I can't remember what it was, but a hell of a good story. The Day of the Jackal, of course, stands up as a great piece of suspense. After that, I think he kind of lost his way a bit, or maybe I just moved on in the genre, but I read the first three when I was about 13 or 14.
Yeah, I really loved them. I thought The Day of the Jackal was a masterpiece of that kind of writing.
It really was tremendous. Very good film too, and there has been a sort of remake of a kind on one of the streamers. I think Netflix, maybe Disney Plus, where they obviously adopt those themes. But The Day of the Jackal, the original movie, I actually went looking for it, and it is one you can't stream, Jack. You've got to buy it. You got to buy it outright. It's not on there.
I watched it a little while ago in 3 loops on YouTube, and it's what's his name? Fox was
Edward Fox.
Edward Fox. Yeah. It's a wonderful film from its time, and it still stands up. It still looks terrific.
And the Odessa File, I remember going to see the movie with my father, the Odessa File. John Voight, I think, in that as the hero. And, of course, it was named the Odessa File because the Black Sea port of Odessa was a sort of a distribution point for some Nazis wanting to flee and go and live in South America. Again, just really high-paced thriller sort of thing. I think they're the only 3 I've read of his. He was given a CBE in 1997. He flew fighter jets during his national service, which would have been post-war, obviously. He was born in 1938.
I love the story about him getting his start in being a foreign correspondent. He was working for Reuters in London, and the journalist who was covering Paris developed a heart murmur and had to go home. And the boss stuck his head around the corner and said, "Anybody here speak French?" And within a couple of days, he was the Paris correspondent.
It's not all luck, is it, Chief? It's not all luck. That reminds me, and I'll very quickly tell this story. This is around the death of Aussie Bob Trimboli, who had been located in Ireland, and Australia didn't have an extradition treaty with Ireland at the time. And then he fled to Spain, and there were large news crews. We're talking about media these days, but these were Channel 7, Channel 9, and perhaps even Channel 10 sent armies of journalists and production staff, cameramen and so forth into Spain to try and find him. And the rumour had come through that Aussie Bob was dead. And my great mate, the wonderful Mark Colvin, had been covering an economic conference in Paris. And he and his producer and cameraman drove down to Spain, drove through this throng of media, and he just walked into the morgue in wherever city Aussie Bob had passed away, and he spoke to the morgue technician, and he spoke Spanish. Colvin spoke Spanish and French and German. So it's not luck, right? And the morgue technician said, "Oh, would you like to see the death certificate?" "Oh, yes, please photograph that." And he got the scoop. He wasn't there first. He had the skills to be able to pull it off. So when it comes to journalism, I think it's a lot of it's not luck. Israel and Gaza, Jack. The Freedom Flotilla, containing the teenage Swedish Greta Thunberg.
I don't think she's still a teenager, is she?
She's 16, I think, isn't she?
No.
Isn't she? Oh, did I get that wrong?
I think she was 16 about 6 years ago.
Well, that might have been why I wrote a piece in the Oz yesterday saying she'd have to learn fractions at 16, but they cut out the 16. So that's probably why. She may well be an adult now, Jack.
I think she is.
Quick search, but the first thing I've got to say is it's not really a flotilla if it's only one boat.
No, I thought that was a bit skinny on the flotilla side.
There was another boat, and we do know that boat was bad things happened to that boat in a Sicilian port, and I think there were two planned to make the journey, but as it was only one, and as of reports today, it would seem that Thunberg has been offered the opportunity to, I'm still up there, has been offered the opportunity to watch a video of Hamas horrors, but has declined them, Jack.
Yeah, she is. She is 22, by the way.
22, all right. Yeah. She was hanging out with some pretty indifferent people, Jack, I've got to say, on the boat.
It didn't look like a grade A team sheet, did it?
No, there was some pretty ordinary characters there. The Brazilian was the one who caught my eye. He'd attended the funeral of Hezbollah leader Nasrallah in Lebanon and considered that a great honour to be there. And he referred to Nasrallah, an outright terrorist, as a martyred saint and beloved leader who inspired people across the globe and an historic figure in the anti-colonial struggle. Good Lord.
I remember seeing photos of the Brazilian at the time at the funeral, yes. Yeah.
Well, I did see a bit of social media saying that they'd been attacked, they'd been raided, they'd been sent to a sort of torment, and then I saw the footage and they were handed sandwiches, Jack.
Yeah, nice big fat.
Oh, they've looked pretty good, those sandwiches.
Yeah, they did. What are they? They're Jewish.
Something. We would call it
Jewish food. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're quite. I've had them. They're quite nice, but
and a drink and so forth, and then said to them that their boat was towed to an Israeli port, and said to them, "Well, you should open your mind to what happened on October 7." But it would seem, on this report anyway, that Greta Thunberg has declined the opportunity to look at the footage.
Do you think they should have let them through?
I can't understand why. I mean, this was a publicity stunt, right? Greta Thunberg, she's got a conscience, she's got her opinions. I don't have a problem with this. The problem I have with it is that while all of the spotlight shifts to her and her boat and what happens to her next and whether she watches the videos of October 7 or not, that spotlight has shifted from Gaza, where it belongs. And that's what I dislike about these sort of publicity stunts, Jack. So, I mean, if you are sympathetic to the people of Gaza, as I am, it's just the last thing they need. On board the boat was what was called a symbolic amount of baby formula and rice. So there was no benefit of... Had they been able to shoot through the blockade, and not too many have in recent times, what would have been the benefit of it?
Like they couldn't carry much in the way of aid because
12 people had on a boat. It looked like it should be pottering around the Central Coast.
Yes, yeah. There wasn't room for the aid with all the people who wanted to be on the.
So, I mean, like I say, for me, I mean, Jack and I probably disagree a lot about what has happened in Gaza. But for me, the big problem with this stunt was that it took the spotlight away from Gaza where it belongs.
Yeah.
And it really was a stunt. And she.
But you are right about the people who are on the boat, not just Thunberg. They are all people who live off the publicity that they get from pulling stunts.
Yeah, they are. There was an Al Jazeera journalist who, frequently referred to IDF soldiers as Nazis. There was an MEP, one of the French MEPs, Jack. That's a suggestion in my article. She'd have plenty of time to go on a cruise. Got a lot of administrative work and a lot of paperwork to get through as a member of the European Parliament.
Yes, but the catering on the boat wouldn't have been as good as the expense catering you get when you're an MEP.
Yeah, no, it looked like it could have been a little bit rough. And all that will happen is that these people will be deported and presumably they're told not to come back to Israel anytime soon.
Yes.
And I don't know what happens to the boat, who owns it, and what happens, whether it'll be retrieved. I don't know, but it just was a bit of a stunt. I know a lot of people support what she does. She's a person with a conscience. She's a person entitled to have her opinions, even if those are closed off to some of the outrages committed by Hamas. But this was just a look-at-me stunt, and really, haven't we had enough of these things? Not just from her, of course, but from this sort of infection that we've got, this sort of viral infection of narcissists around the world. All right, US and Mexico relations there, not all that flash, Jack. I might have this somewhat out of order, but we'll just go back to it. Mexico's president has said, if necessary, we'll mobilise. We don't want taxes on remittances from our fellow countrymen. That's in response to tariffs. She also made a public comment, a call for calm among Los Angelinos, and wasn't terribly critical of the Trump administration. But if necessary, we will mobilise. We don't want taxes on remittances from our fellow countrymen. What's going to happen with the tariffs, Jack? Is Trump going to, chicken out again? How's it go? Taco Trump? Is he going to chicken out again?
A bit early to tell. So remittances are about 5% of the GDP of Mexico. It's a not insignificant amount of money.
No. Look, it remains to be seen what's going to happen with tariffs, Jack. And I suspect when the meeting does occur between the Chinese and the US, the Chinese, who play the long game, will give him a little win. They'll let him have so he can run around the Oval Office with his fist pumping in the air.
Do a lap at the TV room with a vase in the hand, thinking he won the premiership.
Let him have a little win until the hammer comes down a bit later on. Dawn French made a bit of a fool of herself while we're just we were leaving Gaza, but we'll just hang on there.
This was another performative stunt from Dawn French.
Yeah,
this time it just backfired.
Don't do this, guys. Dawn French is a great comedian. She's been around for a long time. I was actually watching the old Young Ones recently, Jack, and there she was, part of that entire group. She released a video, I think, on Instagram. Her intention, she said, was never to mock or dismiss or diminish the horror of 7 October. She just wanted to say no to both sides. But she did sort of trivialise what had happened on October 7. She took the video down and apologised. But you wonder what gets into people's minds to do this sort of stuff. I mean, it's the social media equivalent of the open letter. I'm going to write an open letter. I'm so outraged, I'm going to write an open letter. Who gives a shit, for a start? And secondly, isn't it just grandstanding? Anyway, she's at least smart enough to realise she made an error and probably won't make that error again.
No.
Canada, Jack, will it become part of Europe with Greenland?
Yeah. Well, I was rather tickled by this because all the talk about Canada becoming the 51st state, and instead the European officials are jumping in to say, no, it should join us. And in a sense, it does make some sense.
A little bit of sense. Does make a little bit of sense. I don't think it'll happen. I mean,
No.
but there might be some pressure on it to happen if the tariff situation doesn't improve. Yeah, one to watch. Will Canada become? They might be too apologetic for the rest of the Europeans, Jack. They
are very apologetic people, aren't they?
They're very, very apologetic, pleasant people. Finally, in our news, before we head off to sport, the Dull Men's Club. You'd be a member of that, wouldn't you, Jack?
Absolutely. Foundation member. This started in New York with a whole bunch of people sitting around at the New York Athletic Club and discovering that they weren't very interesting people, so they thought they'd form a Dull Men's Club.
Yeah, I love it so far.
And the bit I liked best was they decided to go on a bus tour, but they decided, well, if we're going to be dull, the bus won't go anywhere. So we toured the bus. We walked around the bus a few times. The driver explained the tyre pressure and turned on the windscreen wipers, and that was it.
Now, I believe, is it a Facebook group, Jack? Is that where they live?
Yeah.
So there are some 8,000 members, and I presume
in Australia.
Sorry, I meant to say in Australia alone. So if you do wish to become a member of the Dull Men's Club, one, obviously there's a gender requirement, which might upset some of our listeners, but also you have to be incredibly tediously dull. And so I presume it's the same as joining all these other Facebook groups. You have to request to join, and they approve you. So I think if you're going to try and enjoy the Dull Men's Club, make your application seem really, really boring, and I think you'll be in. And if you're exciting at all in any way, it's not going to go. My other favourite story about this is that Alan Goodwin, who's something of a bigwig in the Dull Men's group in the UK, he recently worried that seeing a lesser spotted woodpecker in his garden might be considered a bit too exciting for the group. So he withheld that.
That's very sensible.
So, if dull is your go, these people, you need to join these people. All right, over to sport. A couple of things in the AFL. We always kick off with the AFL. Don't know if you saw it, Jack. Late in the game, Geelong v the Suns, and the Geelong defender Stewart. Can't think of his first name. Tom Stewart.
Tom Stewart.
Yeah, Tom has absolutely smashed one of the Suns kiddies. Got him right down the middle of the body, but no head contact.
Noah Anderson, he's the captain.
Right, and he was a pretty sick boy for a while, but he was tested and cleared of concussion, and I think he had to be scanned up to see if there's any damage to his chest. Now, when I saw that, Jack, I saw a player in the name, player Stewart, and he had plenty of time to pull out in that. It wasn't. You might remember the young Archer bloke who plays in North Melbourne. He had like a nanosecond to pull out, and he made contact with a bump to the head, got 3 weeks. Stewart, plenty of intent, but no head contact. And that was really just a bit of luck, really. And he took 3 or 4 steps before he made contact to, as you say, the Gold Coast Suns captain. Could have pulled out at any time, Jack.
And it looks like he'll get a walk on that.
He has. He's been told he'd be cleared. He's not no charge.
A month ago, we were told that you couldn't go past the ball and bump the player.
Well, that happened, and Stewart has been cut some slack. And I know where you're going. That there's just been some wild interpretations of this. But I think, and I was talking to a good mate of mine who's in North Barrica. And he saw the same thing. He was in Koh Samui while watching the footy, and I said, the intent from Stewart was right up there. And do you punish on intent, or should you place more emphasis on intent? The current system goes, did you intend to do it? Well, that intent doesn't really come into it. Did you make contact? Was it to the head? Was it serious contact? did the player leave the field or was concussed? Those are the triggers.
Yeah, yeah, and it's all over the shop. It's all inconsistent, and it's just the AFL administration gets the really big things right. The crowd numbers are fantastic. The TV viewership's great. The TV deal's fantastic. All of this stuff they're doing really well, but this smaller stuff they just can't seem to get it right.
Well, there was a really good piece in the Australian magazine on the weekend involved the Tuck family, very famous family. Michael Tuck, of course, was a AFL Games record holder. I think 7 premierships at Hawthorn, and we're talking about his son who suffered very badly from CTE, and just the failure of the response from the AFL, Jack. They've been reports now that they haven't dealt with. So when I saw that thing with Stewart, I'm not trying to pick him out. He's got a bit of form. His coach always plays a good bloke defence. He's a terrific bloke, though. Terrific bloke, which really gets my goat as well. But
I like Chris Scott's adaptability. When they're absolutely guilty, he just says, "I haven't seen it. I didn't have time to look."
No,
at it.
what he did with Stewart, who ironed out a Richmond player a couple of years ago. Look, he's a terrific bloke, and this is, it didn't even get to the it's out of character. Yeah. Terrific family man, and he ran the good bloke defence.
Yeah,
I think intent needs to be considered, because when I think of that incident, the blow to this guy's chest is enough to snap to what we're talking about. Not just concussion or head knocks. What we are talking about, whiplash type injuries, etc. They're going to have to get a lot more serious about this. Otherwise, the AFL will have this bejesus suit out of them by a class action of affected players. And there are quite a few there already. The Geelong ruckman, former Geelong ruckman, John Barnes, Jack, he's another one in a terrible way at the moment. And there are quite a few around. Greg Williams, you see Greg Williams around the rooms at Carlton. And I think he is the head of sport or the head of football there. But Greg Williams has talked about, and he would have suffered that many concussions in his career. So they're going to have to do something about this. We did see the one, Carlton v Essendon, Sam Durham made contact with Adam Chero's head, and he'll get how many weeks, Jack? 3?
3.
Yeah, he's going to get 3, isn't he? It's just unfortunate, but you got to learn. If you're going to bump, that's a big decision, and most AFL players will say there's no point in bumping. You may as well not do it. You may as well skirt around the player and try and either tackle him or loosen the ball from his grasp. And that's the way they're just going to have to learn it. All right, moving on to rugby, Jack. Michael Checker has Leicester in the final. That's in the UK competition, Jack.
It is. I just wonder whether his name will be back on the table for the Australian job at some stage.
Yeah, well, they've got. We mentioned this last week. They've got really, really good ticket sales for the British Lions tour.
They're always going to get that because so many of the Brits and Irish come as well.
True enough. But that looks like it's going to be one really big tour, and then the World Cup coming up after that. Ange Postecoglou did not survive, despite lifting a trophy at Spurs, the first one they won in living memory. He was given the flick by, let's just get it out there, the idiots who run Tottenham Hotspurs.
Yep.
Now, that won't cost Ange too much. I think he's got to get paid out about $8 million out of his contract. £8 million, by the way.
Yeah, yep. I think it's 8 million plus, and someone else will give him a job.
Look, he'll get a job pretty much anywhere he wants to in Europe or indeed in the Premier League.
Celtic could have him back in a heartbeat.
Well, maybe you should have a look at Wrexham, Jack, because I reckon they'll be in the Premier League in a year or two. Yeah, look, it's tough for Ange. He didn't seem bothered by it. He was on holidays in Greece when the announcement was made. he can extend his holiday for a little bit, but definitely his telephone will be ringing with suitors from around the world.
Yeah. A dozen or so of his players jumped onto social media and said that they were unhappy about it, that they loved him and wanted him to start.
Well, in a sort of uncorroborated report on social media, I believe the management have banned some of the songs that they used to have around Ange Postecoglou. So the Angel song, the one, I'm backing Ange instead. That's been banned. I don't know if that's true or not. How do you ban a song or a chant at the soccer? You just can't do it. But yes, most definitely the players are not happy. He obviously had a great relationship with almost everyone on the Spurs list.
Yep.
Wednesday night we've got the Test Championship. I think I said erroneously last week it started Friday, but it starts tomorrow as we record this, and it looks like, well, give us your team, Jack. You just give us your team. Give us your 11.
Oh, I couldn't give you the whole 11, but I think they'll play Constance. I don't think they should, but I think they will.
It doesn't look like it. I did see some signs there. They had slips practice, Jack, with Bo Webster at third, and Cameron Green at gully, and Steve Smith at 2, Usman Khawaja at 1. That is a slips cordon to die for, and I think what will happen is Marnus Labuschagne will open with Uzi, and it would seem that Cameron Green will bat 3.
Okay.
That's.
I wouldn't be unhappy about that.
I wouldn't be unhappy about it, but you may well be right too. So Sam Constance, he's certainly been having a few nets and stuff. But what they should be saying to Sam Constance is, come in, enjoy it, feel the vibe around the place, and then you'll be going to West Indies, and that's when you'll make a name for yourself for the Ashes series starting in our summer. And just the prospect of playing the 2 all-rounders, Webster and Green, is just too tantalising for mine. They should never mess with. In fact, I did see a little clip there from the skipper. He was asked if he could give the batting order, and he said, "I'll just tell you that Steve Smith will be batting at 4. That's the only one I'll give away." So that's they did rather foolishly tinker with that, didn't they?
Did.
Smith opening and what have you didn't quite work out. You've been watching a bit of tennis at Roland Garros, Jack?
Yeah, an epic match, 5 hours and 29 minutes. And the Spanish fellow, Alcaraz, he was 2 sets to 1 down and 5-3 and 40 love. 3 match points Sinner had. And Alcaraz came back and won the match. It really was a terrific tennis match. Interestingly, there were no medical timeouts, no toilet breaks. They just played.
5 hours.
Yep, they were gracious.
I'd be jogging off to the Brasco.
I think they have a break, but
don't
none
do
of the
after the third set.
None of the unofficial breaks. So none of this gamesmanship.
Physios coming out. And,
none of that gamesmanship going on. They both corrected calls on the clay at Roland Garros in favour of their opponent at various stages. But interestingly,
where's Skinner from?
He's Italian, but he looks like he comes from somewhere up near Trieste. He looks more like a Yugoslav than an Italian.
Okay.
And after 5 hours and 129 minutes, Sinner had won 193 points and Alcaraz had won 192, which is just a reminder in the top-level tennis, it's not so much how many points you win, you just got to win the right one at the right time.
There you go. Well, it does sound like a wonderful game. There's a stat that you've got here, Jack. They've compiled. There have now been 5,000 AFL games played since the start of 2000, and who won what? So Geelong have won 395 of their games, and Sydney second, 353. Collingwood 342 fourth. Hawthorn 325. None of that's, I guess, too much of a surprise. Of the interstate clubs, Port and Adelaide and Brisbane have done next best. West Coast Eagles not far away, and then we get down to the bottom of it. Jack, Gold Coast Suns have only won 97 games. The Giants have won 145. Tasted a little bit more success, and there we are, Jack. Third bottom, Carlton, but over that since 2000, they've won 5 spoons. I reckon in 2018 they only had 2 wins, so that's a surprise either. We did see
when you think about it, that if they took the previous 25 years, that would have been 4 premierships.
Oh yeah, and probably winning 2/3 of their games, at least 2/3 of their games.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one. One thing, when I saw this stuff very quickly, looked at it, I thought, oh, this is the free kicks, because someone's done the same thing about the free kicks to each side, whether there's a differential, whether they're plus or minus according to the umpires. And guess who won, Jack?
No, Collingwood?
Eagles. Right, that big crowd, mate. Big angry crowd, and the umpires don't want to make that. I want to get unpopular.
Yeah, well, look, anybody who tells you there's no hometown advantage in umpiring hasn't been to the footy, I reckon.
Or doesn't understand human psychology.
Yeah, when the Swans are playing at the SCG and the fans are really up and about, you're going to get a lot more of the 50-50s, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll be sitting there watching Carlton play away, go, bloody home ground decision. Yeah. All right, well, that takes us out for the Two Jacks, episode 116. Just a quick reminder to our listeners, if you want to drop us a line, we did. I've got to get to this next week. Our good man, baseman Ray, was published in I think in the 9 media papers with a letter. We'll get to that next week, Ray. It was a wonderful thing. It would come as no surprise to anyone who knows Ray well that he hammers out letters to the editor on a regular basis, and he got one up. So we'll have a look at that next week. But it's just a reminder to drop us a line if you want to talk about anything in the show, and that includes criticism, whatever you like. We're thick-skinned. I know Jack is. And I can take a fair bit myself. So, go hard and drop us a line. You get hold of me on my X account. My DMs are always open. Jack the Insider there. And you can get hold of Jack on his Substack. Jack, I'll remember it one day.
Yeah, hongkongjack.substack.com, and you can find me on X as well.
It's not. Yes, you'll find him on X as well, lecturing people about immigration. I just saw you, some poor bloody Mexican bastard. You were getting into him about, oh, come on, wouldn't it be great to settle this now? And you go, I don't think this guy wants to talk about policy development right now. But all right, that takes us out. And thanks for listening, and we'll be back in touch with you next week with episode 117. See you later, folks.
Cheers.